Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the final edition of the Business of Cyber Show. My name is Ted. I'm super excited to talk to you today. If some of you are on holiday or just about to get out for holiday, it is my pleasure to welcome you to what looks like the 20th installment of the Business of Cyber series. The purpose of today is I just want a big shout out and thank you to the folks that have either been on the show, people that have watched this show, or people that have been a part of keeping me moving forward with this idea that the business side of cybersecurity for critical infrastructure was worth talking about. So it's exciting to have everybody here. I think we had 50 or 60 different people show and register. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you an overview of what we talked about, a little bit of a discussion on what we can look forward to as we move into the new year, and really present an offering of kind of what I've learned. This has not been alone. There's been a bunch of people helping me on the back end, a lot of different people from the ecosystem. But I wanted to tell you a little bit of a story of how we got to where we are and what my commitment to the ecosystem, to you all, whether it's practitioners, whether it's CISOs, whether it's people in school, whether it's vendors, what can I do to help you next year? So without further ado, let's dive in. Let's see, right about here. So this is our end of review. As you know, the Business of Cyber series was started really at the end of Q1 on an idea. And that idea was really rooted coming out of a presentation that I made for CS4CA Houston, which I think was in like March 28, 29. Great group of people that put on the CS4CA show, Catalyst Global. Ravi and Kutsi and their team do a really incredible job. I've actually spoken at multiple conferences that they've had globally. Recommend you check them out. That's the CS4, the number, CA. But it was at that Houston conference that I had the opportunity to speak to about 200 plus CISOs, and that's where the Business of Cyber title came from. And it was only after that, and kind of some of the feedback that I got after that, that we decided to make a full, I guess, long form blog content show. So let's see what we got next on our slide deck. Where it started, I want to go through an overview of the different episodes. We really tried to fit as many types of episodes as we could to see what would work at the end of the year. As a fifth generation entrepreneur myself, I'm a big believer that you don't actually have to be right coming out of the gate. You just have to be in the general ball field, and then you start dialing in what you're going to be focused on. And so we'll talk about the most viewed episodes. We'll talk about what I think are some of the most interesting ones that we did. We'll talk a little bit about the overall metrics that kept us going and kept us focused on what we thought the audience wanted to hear. And then finally, I'll keep it open for a little bit of a discussion about 2024. Throughout the whole process, I can see any comments that you're leaving. So I'm excited to, if you got some questions, you got some comments, give us that feedback. So where it all started, as I'm sure some of you know, I'm the CEO of SecurityGate, a product company focused on critical infrastructure sector decision-making for CISOs. And as a product company, you constantly want to tie your product potentially to a story. And one of the stories is, we're not a threat-based tool. We're not a guardian solution, perhaps. We knew that their market was wanting to talk about kind of the resources side of the game. When I think about how to build a team, when I think about my time as a veteran and in the Army, as I think about working for an asset owner in the auditing space, as I think about what it takes to build great teams, I always learned and knew, but I even got taught by some investors previously, that alignment is huge. And I think that going into Q1 of this year, 2023, what I was hearing from CISOs, what I was hearing from OT directors and IT directors is it's just, there doesn't really seem to be alignment on where the cybersecurity strategy is going for different asset owners. Now, part of that is because OT became a really new kind of threat of business continuity, business resiliency, business risk over the course of the last decade. And OT maybe didn't align so much with IT, or operations never aligned with IT. There's some of that. What I also saw was that there was an immense amount of products that had entered the market that were becoming very expensive, and security leaders were spending more dollars than they could even implement. So they would buy X number of license or X number of hardware units for facilities that may not have been on a maintenance cycle that allowed them to install, test, configure, run, manage those products. We also see tons of venture capital coming into the market, causing a really great wave of innovation. But if product companies don't hit their numbers, if service companies don't hit their numbers, what they have to do is they have to make more on fewer clients. So prices rise, and that supply and demand push and pull, I could see because I was the CEO of a product company. So I took all this to the CS4CA Houston event. And what I learned at that particular event, when I stood in front of all these asset owners, is when I talked about these things, they responded, whether it was up, down, whether it was a thumbs up, whether it was a smile, whether it was a laugh. The true story is that about, we had this premier sponsorship. So we were the highlight speaker on the first day. And most people don't know this, but where Business of Cyber as a title came from was my chief marketing officer was sitting with me behind the stage, behind the scenes. And like 10 minutes prior to going out into the main stage where there was about 220 asset owners, we were still figuring out a title. We were talking about what the CEO wants you to know was a big section. We were talking about connecting business risks with cyber investments or business outcomes with cyber investments. Then there was a third topic, how to develop your team best. And we were like, this is not the traditional threats and risks and hardening and guardian type topics. What are we going to call this thing? And I think it was him that said, you're talking about the business of cyber. And I said, hey, that's it. We're going to go with that. So we changed title slide number 1, walked up there on stage. And like most things that I've done, we waited till the last minute to kind of organize everything. But we're so pleased at kind of the response that we got from the audience. Fast forward about 3 weeks, my CMO comes to me and says, hey, you need to start talking about this stuff more regularly. And hence the Business of Cyber series was born. We decided, to just throw ourselves out there for a couple different iterations. And the first couple, we were just kind of figuring out what kind of content that we want to put out there. And I was alone. I was the only one doing the content, very much like today. And then I said, well, what if we interview people? What if we bring on that person? What if we talk about that? The reason I did that is because I didn't want the content to get stale. I wanted new ideas to come in. Then we turned it into a little bit of an education, right? And so a couple learning points there. I think you got to take risks sometimes, and you got to throw out what you're passionate about. And if you are passionate about what you're talking about, chances are, if it even remotely resonates in the market, you'll get some feedback. And that's what we did. We got people that were giving us thumbs up. We got people that said, hey, keep talking about this. There's some very, really remarkable people that out there that gave me a call very early in Q2 and were like, hey, we saw you online. Keep doing what you're doing, and we'll be there to support you all the time. And so a couple things that I did, I said, I don't know anything about podcasting. I don't think anything about blogs. And so brought a couple people onto the team, one of which is Taylor. She's been part of the SecurityGate team for a couple of years. Actually started as an intern coming right out of school in our marketing department. She's awesome, did everything when it comes to social media. But she and I, along with our CMO and a couple other people, said, hey, what could this really be if we actually got somebody dedicated to it? So we found Viviana Lopez from the University of Houston, brought her on in a internship capacity. And she did so incredibly well with the Business of Cyber. It sort of launched up when she came on board. She started working more on our posts. She started working more on the actual content. She started coordinating with different speakers. And so for us, it was a really, there was more than just me behind the camera. So all the different cameras that we have and things like that, what we call kind of version 1.1, which was from the summer onward. I really want to thank these two folks for really helping make it happen. Wouldn't have been able to do it without them. I'm going to go ahead and share my full screen right here because 20 episodes, we wanted to be able to figure out one thing and one thing in particular. What is the type of content and what kind of form does that come in? So we tried a lot of things. We tried interview style. We tried presentation style. We tried, single individual style. And what we managed to find is that we got enough content to talk for about an hour. And so we figured out that content piece. A lot of people do short videos. A lot of people do instructional videos. We tried a couple different things. What we think that the Business of Cyber series and what y'all think, I think is working the most is long form interview style content. It's what I'm comfortable doing. I usually don't make a plan or write any of the questions down. I try to have a 5 to 7 minute interview before we kick off, but find really interesting people in the industry that have an expertise within the critical sector cyberspace, and then create a really simple title that we can then have a conversation about. So as we go 1 through 20, The Business of Cyber, just in general, brought a lot of people. It was kind of a repeat of what we did at CS4CA. Ways to engage your board really kind of put us talking to the audience alongside maximizing your resources and a discussion about the CISO resignation. It kind of put us in that box where we said, look, we're not talking about tech stuff. We're talking about people stuff. We're talking about budget stuff, and we're talking about time. These are the resources that are finite. And so that first 4 or 5, the feedback that we got from the audience was people started to come on board a little more. There was 15, and then there was 25, and then there was 40 people that were registering. We started figuring out how to really, serve the community and what we were talking about. Then we started to test a little bit more specific things. What's the difference in audit versus assessments? Let's get deep in cyber controls. Let's get into a manufacturing case study. These were still ones that we did by ourselves. And I said, look, I think that it will be more engaging if we get a topic that people want to talk about and we bring somebody on that can talk about that. And that's where we started testing out the great relationship that we have and I have with the ISA Secure team. We had our top shows, which you'll see in a couple minutes, all were around the series of standards for 62443. So this is also when the Business of Cyber team started really dialing in their communication via polls, via posts, via feedback, via comments. What do you want to hear about? And so we listened, and we were rewarded with the number of people that logged in. So our intro to ISA IEC 62443, I think is one of the most widely viewed presentations of the year in a lot of ways that I've been able to see, both in initial registrants as well as folks that were coming back later. And then we went 2 weeks later, there was so much of a demand to go deeper into one of the chapters, which was 3-2. We had someone come in and give their perspective on how that standard was written and how do you deploy it. Talked about training and certs, and then 12 through I think 18 and 19, we had a lot of fun. We brought in CISOs, we brought in some security professionals, we brought in people that had never done a podcast. We brought some people that do podcasts all the time, and we just had fun with it. Some of them, resonated a little bit more with others. But what we did stay true to was this theory that somebody has something to talk about, and I want to pull and extract from them data points, trends, ideas, questions. And what I hope to do and what I'm going to do more of next year is that kind of volley of questions, listening to the market, which is the people that are actually in the live sessions. Hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? So one of the ones that I had the most fun was who is winning the cyber race between Europe and the United States. Go check that one out. A European was saying it was America, and an American was saying it was Europe. And we had a lot of fun with that one. The other one that I really liked was specifically focused on chemical sector. We had a CISO come in and really talk about the challenges that he faced as a CISO. And what was awesome was how aligned he and I were on the same viewpoints. So very interesting on all the different episodes. You can plan to see a lot more of those as we move into next year. Let's see. So the most viewed episodes, like I had shared previously, ended up being the deep dive into ISA IEC 62443-2, followed by the intro to the 62443 series of standards. The former was Kenny Mesker, and the latter was Andre Rustino from ISA Secure. Unbelievable gents that helped out a lot in really driving forward an understanding to both experts as well as novices in the industry. Hey, why was this series of standards built, and how do you get started with them? And then we brought in some folks that had just completed some training, as well as someone from ISA Secure on the training. And then the third most watched was 4-1. So these are 720, 650, 500 people attending. Never had in my mind an idea that we'd be able to reach that many people on a Tuesday morning at 10:30. But shout out to you guys, shout out and kudos to the market to say, hey, look, this is stuff we want to talk about more. And I think that there's more there. So stay tuned for what we're going to be doing next year. But it taught us that kind of that interview style was really important. The other thing was the average registered attendees per episode were 152. Like I said, I didn't set out for the Business Cyber to have a certain number of metrics. I didn't set out that a certain number of followers were going to follow me on this content, but I'll be truthful. I've been humbled, and I've been really, really charged up. And so we started tracking these metrics because we really wanted to recognize we need to give people the content. I think it was Viviana, give the people what they want, right? Like I'll be the first to tell you, on this journey of business of cyber that all of you are a part of, there were a couple times where I'm like, that's not an area of expertise for me, or I'm not sure I really want to go in that direction. I don't know if I'm ready for that. And it was Viviana, a couple other people in my network. They're like, give the people what they want. If they're liking that piece, and go and do more on that. And so kind of took a little risk myself, and I think it was rewarding to see that much feedback. So I was super pumped. This was the one thing that I found most compelling. Never done a podcast, and yet people were staying in and talking and listening. And it was a really humbling moment when I started to see that if you get a certain number of people in, they're going to stay throughout the duration. This is not a short podcast. This is a long one. So I don't think that's me. I think that's the content that we're talking about. And I think it's the people that are coming to have those discussions. I think it's the engagement. So we were really pleased at the retention rate of generally 90% of the time, or like 95% of the episode was being watched by attendees. And so we're going to keep that metric that we're going to track. We start watching, see when people start dropping off, and we start saying, hey, wait, what are we doing different that we need to either stop doing or change? So we're tracking these kind of metrics because we want the Business Cyber series to serve the community. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing next year is we're going to be leaning forward on our calendar to really start looking at 10, 12, maybe even 15 episodes ahead. Let's see. What's planned for 24? Perfect timing. So what is planned for 2024 is that we're going to continue the Business of Cyber series. We're going to continue to get some big ticket items, like big, large topics like AI and cybersecurity, or like budgets in 2024. And then we're also going to get really granular. We're going to try to bring in some experts across the field, and we're going to try to break the mold a little bit. Right now, one of the things that I've seen in Business of Cyber series is there's a lot of people that get excited about a topic. They start commenting on the topic, and then some of the there are some folks in the industry that have some really firm belief systems. I call them the whitebeards. They're the people that have been in the game, and it took them 30, 40 years to understand that knowledge base, that tribal knowledge base. And I dealt with the same challenge in oil and gas. And before that, I dealt with it in the military. And that is, you have an aging population that knows so much, and it took a really long time to learn. And with a select few percentage of those folks, is they want to do what is called badge protecting. It's like, well, you can't learn OT cybersecurity that fast. And there's no way that going to that class, and there's no way that talking to that person will ever enable you to learn what I learned. And I think that is not healthy for the industry. I think that cybersecurity skills are as short as they've ever been, and they don't seem like there's going to be kind of an increase in that supply. And so one of the things that you can trust that I'm going to do in 2024 is I'm going to call out people like that. I'm going to put them on the show. I'm going to encourage them to come on the show. I'm going to challenge folks that have a limiting belief system about what is positive and true and capable in this market. And I'm going to say, if we don't train the younger population, we don't figure out a way to streamline their training, then we're going to be in a worse off situation that we are. That's one of the things that I saw in the Business of Cyber series, is that there were some people that had some negative thoughts, some negative comments, but that doesn't really bother me, because I was overwhelmed with user metrics that were liking the content. So I think I owe it to folks that have been watching this series for a while to call out some of those negative belief systems that are not making us better. There will also be some more granular overviews of where the real metrics are when it comes to cybersecurity dollars, right? I've got a couple speeches coming up about how OT investors and analysts and just general venture and private equity capital in this market is doing okay, but it could be doing a lot better. What does that do for the average buyer? We're going to get granular about that. I'm going to try and take things that I've learned on my journey and put them into the CISO's hat. The other thing that I'm going to be doing is that we are I'd say we're like rounding second base on a new podcast that we're going to be coming out with. We're still trialing in a name, but one of the biggest challenges that I hear not so much on the series, but people are saying to themselves or saying to me, is they're saying, hey, Ted, I know what all my top cyber controls are that I got to fix, but man, I don't know how much this is all going to cost me. I don't have the staff to go and evaluate all these. I don't even have the staff to implement these. Where do I go next? Where do I go next? So I spent a lot of my time helping folks kind of make out their next decision. And I think there's a really cool idea of being able to bring in a lot of different product vendors and do the one thing that nobody wants to do, or all the podcast hosts say never to do, and that is bring up your product. So I want you to envision a world where there's a podcast that is specifically dedicated to giving a certain amount of time for people to pitch their product and do so in an environment where they're actually learning, right? They're not trying to sell, they're just trying to educate. I think that if we could put out 50 or 100 episodes on 50 or 100 different cyber controls where you as an asset owner or practitioner can go to this podcast, not the Business Cyber, but a secondary one, say, man, we'll just go look at those controls and they're going to tell you everything they know about the different products in the space. Now, the reasoning behind that is the foundation of why I want to invest the time to do that. It's twofold. I don't want the Business and Cyber series to become, a mouthpiece for products. I think we talk about the challenges and the resource challenges. We're going to keep it. We're going to keep it laser focused on that. We've got a great trajectory. We've got a great lineup starting for Q1. We're not going to mess with that. But the second reason is that there are a massive amount of dollars that product and service companies spend to educate the public on their value. Almost 40 cents on every dollar that they raise or spend is on sales and marketing to educate the market. And an ungodly amount of hours are wasted by asset owners having to sift through thousands of these websites and tech data sheets and analyst portfolio readings just to figure out who should I be evaluating. And then once they go to evaluate them, they have to spend all this time just to get the baseline understanding of what that company does, where its sweet spot is. And then they haven't even gotten to a demo yet. And then once they get to the demo, bottom line, asset owners don't have time. And the product and service companies are spending too much time and money on trying to connect. And so, my hypothesis is that if I could take the same kind of effort, same sort of resources on my end to build that podcast, to connect these folks, then I feel like I might be doing something for the industry, saving the product companies money and saving the asset owners time. They meet in the middle. That's my goal. Stay tuned for a name because we're going to be figuring that out. In closing, I was humbled the other day. I went to an Army-Navy. I'm a West Point grad, and so the Army-Navy game is a big thing for us. And so the Army-Navy game was a couple weeks ago. A buddy of mine from school, caught me, and a lot of people at that event were yelling out, "Ted, Ted, Ted, Ted." I said, "How do all these people remember my name?" And I finally remember, I think it's the Business of Cyber because they keep seeing me pop up on their feed. So this gent came to me and he says, "Man, I want you to understand we're all rooting for you." And I said, "What does that mean?" And he wanted to know the story about Business of Cyber. And I told him, very much like I told you guys. And he says, "I just want you to know that, if you ever get to a point where you don't know what you're going to talk about, or you don't know if it's the right audience, or you don't know if you're acting like a fool, or just understand that there's a bunch of people out there that are rooting for you, and to just keep doing it." And I promised him I would. That's me signing off for 2023. I want to thank you for giving me your time. I want to thank you for being a supporter of the Business of Cyber series. Thank you for the feedback. Thank you for all the likes and the comments. They mean a lot. And we're going to take it seriously in 24. We're going in to take a couple weeks off. And when we come back, we're going to be charged up, and we're going to double, triple, quadruple, quintuple the value. And we look for you all to challenge us on figuring out ways to talk about resources. There aren't enough of them in the critical infrastructure sectors, which means we got to use them wisely. Use your time wisely over the holidays. Hug your family, get recharged, and let's go make 2024 the best that we could ever dream of. Cheers.